Here's a crash review session on the gross domestic product.
So here we're asked about an economy that produces three goods: hamburgers, computers, and bicycles, and we're given the quantities produced and corresponding prices for the years 2015 and 2020, and that's given in this table up here. In A, we're asked to calculate the real GDP in 2020, assuming the base year is 2015. So what we're going to do is, because we're calculating GDP for 2020, we're going to use quantities from 2020 for the three goods, but we're using real GDP where the base year is 2015, then we'll be using prices from 2015. And what we're going to do is try and calculate the market values for the hamburgers, computers, and bicycles, where we multiply price times quantity. The only difference here is that because it's the real GDP, we're going to be using prices from the base year, 2015. So for example, to get the value of hamburgers, we're going to take the price of hamburgers in 2015 times the quantity of hamburgers produced in 2020. We do the same for the computers and the bicycles, and if we punch that in the calculator, we get the number that these different multiplications give us, and that's just the market values of the three goods. If we add them up, we'll get the real GDP for 2020, and then we always want to state the answer in the form of a sentence, okay, or at least include the appropriate units here. If we use 2015 as a base year, the real GDP in this economy in 2020 will be $13,600.
Now we're told to find the same value but using a different base year. So we're looking at the prices of 2020 and the quantities of 2020. So you just multiply for each product, multiply the price by the quantity again, and what you're going to get is, if you punch in the numbers, you're going to get 18,950. So it's important to write out your whole calculations and all the formulations that you do, so show your work and then write a sentence interpreting that. So the real GDP of this economy in 2020 is 18,950. Are the calculations different? Yes, we had 13,600 first and now 18,950. Why? Well, it's because of the prices. If you look here, we had from 5 to 10, 200 to 250, and 50 to 100. So what's happening is that because the prices are increasing, the value of the GDP that we get is also increasing.
For each of the following, state whether it would be included in the measure of Canada's GDP in 2020 and explain. We're going to assume all events occur in 2020 unless otherwise specified. So in the first example, Dave shovels the snow for his neighbor Mark, who is injured. We need to think about four things in particular. If this event checks all four boxes, then we would include it in Canada's GDP. Okay, so it needs to be a final new product made in Canada, and it needs to be a recorded transaction. This is not a recorded transaction, it's a favor. So this would not count in Canada's GDP because the payment isn't reported to Stats Canada. Clarice, a Canadian citizen, buys a new Ford truck that was produced in the US. So this was not made in Canada. It would not count in Canada's GDP. It would count in the US GDP. So it's actually just a Canadian import. It would be excluded. Juan buys coffee from Tim Hortons. This is a final product, newly produced, made in Canada, and it is a recorded transaction. So it would be included, okay? It wouldn't be included as a consumption expenditure, and we would just keep in mind that the value of the coffee beans themselves, if they're not produced in Canada, which they probably aren't, they would be subtracted as imports. Brenda receives an income tax credit from the government. That's just a transfer payment. So here, it's not actually anything newly produced. So we would exclude it, okay? Doesn't represent the production of anything new, just a transfer payment.